So on to our next little tidbit, and I love this one, and it's got so much easier to do it in modern times, as it were, with updates from Premiere. So yeah, let's start as we mean to go on. Let's create a new sequence. Just to touch on, we're in the sequences bin, and I'm just going to Control and N for new, and I'm going to just title this Blurred Out Face. Boom, let's go into that one. And I have taken the liberty to select some footage, which is titled Young Creative Multi-Ethnic Team of, and a stupidly long number. So what is the premise for this? Well, first and foremost, just want to make sure we're set to frame size. Yeah. And this is, if you ever have footage that you need to blur someone's face out of, you can do this with options, but the engine in Premiere and the technique I'm going to use in this section is mainly at faces, because the engine is just so good, or better. let's not overpromise. Better at tracking faces. So we've got this footage here, which is of a team in a work environment, and it turns out this woman right here is actually the chief analyst for MI5. And we realized that we can't show her face, but we need to show the rest of the footage. So how do we sort that out? Well, let's find a nice clean frame that we're happy with. I'm happy with this frame here where we can see all her face. And we're just going to come over to effects, and we're going to search for mosaic. And we don't want in or outs. That might not even be in yours. That's obviously from presets that I've downloaded. But we want this stylized mosaic. Okay, so let's just drop it on, and there you go. You can't recognize her. So there you go. We're done. I'm only kidding. Obviously we're not done. So that's now dropped the mosaic over the whole clip in the effects controls. So we need to cut out a certain little bit, and there's a reason why I've done this now rather than before, and that's because we're used to using masks. Now if we were to use a mask like we did before in opacity, we're going to start, as our starting point is going to be the ellipse. If we click that, well, yeah, okay, we're masking, but we're masking everything out, and we're keeping the mosaic. So we undo that, and as you can see under mosaic, we also have these options. So if we select ellipse tool, cracking, done. And that's how I'm only joking, I'm in a funny mood today. So yeah, this is the ellipse tool, and that's who we want to cover. So first and foremost, there's a lot of blocks there, and we kind of want it a little bit finer. So I'm going to drag this down. Well, we don't want 1, we don't want 2. Let's say we want 4. And let's say maybe 4 vertical blocks as well. No, maybe not. Let's go higher. Oh yeah, of course, the higher the number. Idiot. Let's go to 40. And let's go 40. I knew there was a 4 in there somewhere. I am reading my notes, I promise. So as you can see, we've got smaller blocks because we've got a lot more horizontal, a lot more vertical, and that just makes it a little bit better than just a big chunky thing like she's in Fortnite. So first and foremost, we need to resize this. So we just grab a little handle and we bring this down, so we're covering her face and here as well. The thing is with the ellipse tool, it gives you a great starting position, but the minute that you move one of the actual handles, you'll see that it obviously moves everything. But I'm quite happy with that. That's a good place to start. So this is our starting point, and we've got a nice clean version of the face blurring. In what I mean by that is, if I just turn off the effects, it's right around her face. That's kind of where we want. Now this is where we use the magic of tracking. Remember when I hit the wrong button before? That's not what I want to do here. I want to mask the path, and I want to track that mask. So something that's kind of sped everything up massively in Premiere Pro of recent years is that preview isn't automatically on. Okay, I would always double check that and make sure that preview is turned off. The reason why is it used to be on by default and you couldn't turn it off. I don't even think it was in the options there. And what it did was it previewed every single frame and it took a lot longer, because rather than just finding the information itself and kind of storing that for when it's finished tracking, it literally had to render out each and every frame as it went, and it took ages. So here we are, we're in here, we've got the mask path here, and I'm just going to track. So I'm going to keep position, scale, and rotation, because her position kind of stays the same, but the scale and rotation doesn't. In fact, you know what? I don't think we get any closer to her, do we? I'm just going to put a mark here. Marking on a clip is just M while it's selected. If nothing's selected, remember M, and it makes a mark in the timeline. I'm just making a mark there because that's where that mask is married up to. But she doesn't really get that. She doesn't really move. She keeps the same distance to the camera. So yeah, okay, maybe I'll make it even easier. So I'm going to say position and rotation. Position and rotation. And then we're just going to track forward. So we hit a play button here and we just let it do its thing. And as I said, it goes a lot quicker than it used to. This amount where we're going about 9 seconds up to, what's that? Give or take, is about 10 seconds. That would normally take about anything from about 2 to 3 minutes. Whereas, as you can see, this is taking what, 20, 30 seconds tops. And I mean, that's done. That was brilliant. Right, let's just see where we're at. That looks good. That's kind of off her a little bit. And good. But then it doesn't do anything. Why doesn't it do anything? Well, that's because if you look here, all these keyframes have been generated for every single frame from where we tracked, but we tracked forward and we started halfway through the clip. So how do we do the rest? I know that we need to kind of play around with it, but let's get the base in here. And to track backwards, we just put the playhead before, and we, rather than hit that, which is what I hit in a previous section, we go to the next keyframe, which is the keyframe we started with, and then we just track backwards. And again, this will be nice and quick. And I know I said it took about 2 to 3 minutes in normal. It could have even taken longer, to be honest with you, depending on the size of your footage. And if you imagine, if you've got to do this a number of times in a project, time takes money, time costs money. And yeah, it's all about that time versus money thing. We've been there before. Good. So I'm happy with that. Don't really need it there because her face isn't in. So let's see how this plays back first without us doing anything. That's following her quite well. You couldn't distinguish her. You couldn't recognize her. He crosses in front of her. His hand comes across her a bit, but that's fine. She's definitely hidden from view. I would say you definitely couldn't recognize her from that. However, we can do something else as well. I'm going to actually pick a point where maybe she's a little bit, I'm happy with that. So we're going to mask this path, and I'm just going to drag this down a little bit. So what that's done is that's affected that keyframe that we were at. Now, if I'm just going to put a mark there so I can mark which keyframe I play with. If we play that forward now, that's going to jump. You see how it jumped? That's because it jumped back to the other keyframe. So what we can do now is if we track forward again from here, we can overwrite the previous keyframes. And just like before, it just adds that little bit more information. Remember, everything up until this point was tracking from this frame that we selected, and it was changing its aspects because of where she'd moved, but it was still using this frame here as its source, as its reference point. But that looks much better, and yeah, good. I'm happy with that. What I'm also going to do, remember when we looked at this, let me just tilde her in. Remember when we looked at this in the past? And I said this was just a center thing. What this can do, rather than having to go down here and grab for your feather, this is actually your handle for your feather. So you can actually pull this out a little bit and just feather it out. Sometimes that kind of it just gives that little bit more. And don't forget, we can always expand the mask if we want. Obviously, we don't need to do it that much, maybe to about maybe about there. Obviously now if that's the only thing you wanted to keep and you wanted to blur out everything else, you can invert it. So there she is and she's being kept. But we won't do that. In fact, it's sometimes fun to check if that's what you're actually masking out. Yeah, that's her. So let's take off that inversion, and that is almost it. Don't really need it before then. So what we can do is if we go back frames just to where she's there, what I want to do is I want to kind of find out where that's where she's kind of starts to be covered again at the beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to delete these keyframes. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I'm going to delete those keyframes too. Tilde out of there. And let's just make sure the path is on there again. And I'm going to just slowly edge up with my scroll wheel on my mouse. And just ever so slightly tweak it around this hand. See, the thing is, a lot of time when you're watching like stuff like this on the news, it's done really quite crudely, and that's because they don't really have time. They've got to turn around the news, you know, in a matter of hours, if not minutes. But if you've got the time, when you see documentaries, they're always blurred out better, and that's purely because they have more time. They have more time in their budget. I'm just going to add a point there and just bring her up there. Bring that up there, bring that whole thing up there, good. I just want to close this off now. Keep coming. Skip about 3 or 4 frames. Good with that. And now I know that by the time we get to there, she's completely, yeah, she's covered. All you can see is glasses. So good, I'm going to leave that there. And I tilde it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. Okay. And then I'm going to make a cut, or I'm going to trim the end of this at that point. I'm going to come down to the bottom one and I'm going to delete this mosaic. Just delete it all the way off. And if I put a crossfade on this by selecting the end and Control and Shift to add that crossfade, that then comes in at that point. It comes in a little bit too late. It might be because the cross dissolve takes too long. But you see how we're only introducing it when it needs to be there. There we go. Just check that beginning again. Can we see her through? That's okay. I'm thinking if enemy forces see. But as you can see, the actual engine has done really well to track her and get it all the way through. You won't be able to identify her from that. And the agent's identity is safe.